Have you ever felt like your family was the one place where you should feel safest, only to have it be the place that hurts you the most? Imagine this. You're 22, just starting to figure life out, and instead of the loving support you expect from your family, they leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere, laughing as they drive away. It's not a nightmare, it's my reality. That summer, I was working at my dad's hardware store. Nothing glamorous, but it was enough to get by. I was living at home because, according to my dad, college was a waste of money. We weren't poor, but vacations to Disney were a dream we could never afford. So when my dad suggested a family road trip to my uncle's wedding in Colorado, I figured it would be a nice break. What I didn't know was that this road trip would change my life in ways I never expected. It started like any other trip. A long, hot drive with the windows rolled down, my brother Alan cracking jokes in the back, and my dad leading the charge with his usual dad humor. But something felt off. There was tension simmering beneath the surface. By the time we reached a lonely rest stop in Colorado, something snapped. My family, my so-called family, decided to leave me behind. Just like that, they were gone. And there I was, standing in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the echo of their laughter in my ears. I wish I could say I was shocked, but at that moment, it felt like the culmination of years of neglect, teasing, and cruel jokes at my expense. They had abandoned me, and somehow that hurt more than anything they had ever said. But what happened next is what truly changed everything for me. Because sometimes, when you're left with nothing, you realize that you don't need anyone's approval or validation to survive. You just need to find a way to make it on your own. And that's exactly what I did. But how did I get there? How did I go from being the family's punching bag to building a life on my own terms? That's what this story is about. A story of betrayal, survival, and ultimately, finding freedom in the most unexpected way. I can still picture the evenings when my family would gather around the dinner table. The table was always filled with food, but it wasn't because we were rich. It was because my mom, Irene, poured her heart into cooking, making sure there was always something to eat, even if it wasn't much. Dad would sit at the head of the table, always the loudest, his words filled with complaints about life, his job, and how he felt underappreciated. I remember feeling so small in those moments, like I didn't belong at that table. Mom, she was a quiet woman, always caught between the conflict of Dad and me. She rarely spoke up, and when she did, her voice was soft, almost as if she was afraid to interrupt the tension in the room. I grew up watching her, not knowing if she was there to support me or if she was just a passive bystander in the chaos. It's strange the way your parents shape your world without you even realizing it. You think they're your safety, but sometimes they can feel like walls closing in around you. Then there was Alan, my older brother. He was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He had Dad's approval from day one, and that's what made me feel invisible. Alan got straight A's, played sports, was the son Dad could proudly show off. And me, I was the screw-up, the one who couldn't meet Dad's impossible standards. I remember him once saying, "Why can't you be more like Alan? He's the one who makes us proud." It was like a punch to the gut every time he said it. Alan would never understand. He was Dad's perfect image, and I was the shadow. The one who could never do enough, be enough. I guess that's what I hated most, how everyone just expected me to follow in Alan's footsteps, without ever considering that I wasn't him. I wasn't built to be his mini-me. I wasn't even sure who I was supposed to be in that family. All I knew was that no matter how hard I tried, I was always the one falling short. And as the years went by, that feeling only grew stronger. It was like I was playing a game where the rules kept changing, and no matter what, I'd always lose. We weren't poor, But we were never the kind of family that went on vacations or spent money on things that weren't necessary. My dad, banks, always said that money should go to what matters most, and college didn't fit that mold. So when the idea of a family road trip to my uncle's wedding in Colorado came up, I thought it might be a nice change of pace, a little getaway. But little did I know, that trip would become the turning point in my life. On the outside, it was just a family trip, a few days on the road, a wedding to attend. But deep down, I had a sense something wasn't right. There was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. 3 days into the trip, I started to regret not making up an excuse to stay home. I felt like I was just tagging along, invisible again, stuck in a game where no one had bothered to tell me the rules. The tension between me and my family had reached a breaking point, and I didn't even realize it until it was too late. This trip, this family road trip, was supposed to be a bonding experience, but instead, it was the beginning of the end. It wasn't just about being left behind on the side of the road. It was about a lifetime of feeling overlooked, undervalued, and ultimately abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me the most. But at the moment it happened, I couldn't see the full picture. I just knew that the pain of being abandoned in that quiet, lonely place was deeper than anything I had ever felt, and it was just the beginning of a journey I never could have expected. I stood there, the harsh Colorado sun beating down on my back, squinting against the bright light as I stepped out of the rest area bathroom. I hadn't realized how long I had been inside, maybe 10 minutes, maybe less. I had just gone in to stretch my legs and use the bathroom, no big deal. But when I walked out, I froze. The parking spot where our dark green Suburban had been was empty. I blinked, thinking maybe they had moved the car, playing some stupid prank. But as I looked around, I saw no sign of them. The lot was deserted, just me and a few scattered strangers coming and going. No one was laughing. No one seemed to know what was going on. I walked around the entire rest area, checking every corner, convinced I had missed something. But nothing. The car was gone. My family, my own flesh and blood, had left without me. At first it didn't sink in. I stood there telling myself that they were just messing with me, that they'd be back in a few minutes. I waited, sitting on the curb, my mind racing. What was taking them so long? It didn't make sense. An hour passed, then 2. I told myself that I was overreacting, that they'd come back. But deep down, I could feel something cold creeping in, a gnawing feeling in my gut. They weren't coming back. I tried to borrow someone's phone. I approached a woman with 2 kids asking if I could use it, but when I went to dial my family, something stopped me. A lifetime of memories flashed through my mind. The teasing, the laughs at my expense, the way my dad always looked at me like I was a disappointment. I remembered every moment of humiliation, every time they had made me feel like I was nothing. I paused, and in that moment, I realized something I had never admitted to myself before. They weren't coming back, and they never would, not because they forgot about me, but because they didn't care. Instead of calling my family, I called information. I got the number for the nearest shelter in Grand Junction, about 40 miles away. Then I asked the woman if she could give me a ride into town. I told her my family had an emergency and would come back for me later. She hesitated, but something in my expression must have made me look harmless enough, and she agreed. The first night at the shelter felt like a wake-up call. I had nothing, no ID, no wallet, no phone, no family, just the clothes on my back. I felt exposed, vulnerable in a way I had never experienced before. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of clarity. I didn't need them. I didn't need anyone to come and save me. For the first time in my life, I had to rely on myself. And somehow, that felt empowering, even though it terrified me. The shelter worker, a guy named Dave, let me use their computer to look up my uncle's address from the wedding invitation I had seen earlier. I thought maybe I could go to the wedding and find my family there, but as I sat staring at the screen, I asked myself, why? Why chase after people who had abandoned me just for a laugh? Why seek validation from people who had never given me the love and support I deserved? That was the turning point. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to be a part of that family dynamic anymore. I wanted something different, something better. I created a new email account, looked up resources to replace my stolen ID, and started researching jobs that paid cash. I made a plan. I didn't know how long it would take or how I'd get there, but I knew I had to take control of my life. No more waiting for someone else to come through for me. 2 days later, I walked into a small diner called Sonny's. The owner, Geraldine, was this older woman with purple streaks in her gray hair and more tattoos than I expected from someone in her 60s. I asked her if she needed help, explaining that my wallet had been stolen. She looked me up and down, sizing me up before she said, "Dishwasher quit yesterday. You steal from me, you're dead. Start now." That was the moment. I didn't have a choice. I had to take the job. And I did. For the next week, I worked doubles, slept at the shelter, wore donated clothes. I was living in survival mode. But every time I scrubbed a plate, every time I wiped down a table, I felt like I was slowly building something, even if it was just a tiny foundation. That first week at Sonny's, I started to feel a shift inside me. I was still the same person, but I wasn't the same person who had been left behind by my family. I was different, and that made all the difference. I wasn't just washing dishes. I was washing away the bitterness, the self-loathing, the years of neglect and humiliation. Every plate I scrubbed away a piece of the past that had defined me. And in its place, I started to see a version of myself that wasn't tied to anyone else's expectations. It wasn't easy. I still had moments where I wanted to give up. I would think about my family, how they'd left me, how they'd never looked back. But with each passing day, I grew stronger. I was surviving on my own. And as much as they had hurt me, as much as they had abandoned me, they were no longer the ones defining my worth. I didn't need them anymore. And that, in itself, was the greatest freedom I could ever have. It's strange how much you change when you're forced to. You think you know who you are, but life has a way of flipping everything on its head. The first few months after I was abandoned felt like a blur, like I was just trying to survive one day at a time. But as time passed, I realized that I wasn't just surviving. I was slowly, piece by piece, building something that had always seemed impossible, my own life. Every morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee at Sonny's diner. I'd start my shift as a dishwasher, but the more I worked, the more I saw the cracks in the life I had been forced to leave behind. Geraldine, the owner, had this tough-love approach to life. She didn't pull any punches, but there was something real about her, something that made me feel like I wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't trying to fix me, but she was teaching me how to stand up on my own 2 feet. I started saving every penny I earned. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Slowly, I built up enough to get a cheap apartment above a laundromat. It wasn't much, a tiny place with walls that seemed to close in on me, but it was mine. No one could tell me how to live, what to do, or how to feel. I was free, and in that freedom, I began to realize something. I had been running from my family for so long, but what I was really running from was not just them. It was the version of me they had created. The one who was always wrong, always falling short. My mom called me a few times, and each time I felt this coldness wash over me. It wasn't her concern that hit me. It was the way she never truly took responsibility for what happened. It wasn't just about me being stranded. It was about a lifetime of being made to feel like I wasn't enough. I didn't call her back. I didn't want to. I didn't need her. But as the months passed, a strange thing happened. I started to notice something in my family's social media posts. My mom posted constant pictures of the past, always showing our family at happy moments, but she never mentioned me. It was like I had never existed. Alan, on the other hand, was still playing the part of the golden child, his life carefully curated for the world to see. But I knew the truth. I could see through the posts. I knew he wasn't as perfect as he pretended to be. But none of that mattered anymore. I'd built something real, something tangible, while they were stuck in a cycle of pretending. Life wasn't easy, but it was real. The loneliness never went away completely. On holidays, I would scroll through social media, seeing families celebrating together, and for a split second, the ache would hit me again. But I wasn't going to let that feeling control me. I couldn't. Not anymore. I had finally found my own way. I had built something that had nothing to do with their expectations or their love. I was standing on my own. Then came the day I received an email from my mom. She had been sending messages for months, always asking if I was okay. But this one was different. It was about my grandmother. She was asking about me, wanting to know if I was still alive. The tone in her message was so desperate, so full of guilt. It almost made me sick. She begged me to come back, to talk to her, to let her know I was okay, but I didn't respond. I couldn't. I had been ignoring their calls for so long, and this was no different. I had made my peace with the fact that they weren't coming back for me. I didn't need them anymore. But even then, the thought of them still reached out in strange ways. One day, I saw a post from my dad on a community page asking for information about me. My heart sank, not because I missed them, but because I realized that they were looking for me. Not because they cared, but because they needed something. They needed money. They needed help. And that made everything so much clearer. I didn't care about their struggles. I didn't care about their problems. I had my own life now, and I had built it without them. The past was gone, and I was not going to let it define me. One day, I was working at Sunny's East, the second location I had helped manage, when I got a message from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. It was my mother. She was frantic, telling me that they had been looking everywhere for me, that they had tried calling, that they were sorry. She claimed it was all a joke, that they had waited for me to come back after they left me stranded. She begged me to come home. I listened to her voice tremble, and for a moment, I almost felt bad, almost. But then I remembered everything, all the times I had been left behind, all the times they had humiliated me, and I felt nothing but anger. But I didn't say a word. I simply hung up. I blocked the number and every other family number I could think of. A month later, I had my own place. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I had worked my way up from dishwasher to prep cook at Sunny's, and Geraldine, who had been tough on me, was now teaching me how to properly cut vegetables. I was finally learning what it meant to build something, not just survive it. But even with all that progress, even with all the success I had found on my own, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family wasn't really gone. And when I saw Alan's name pop up on a news article years later, something inside me clicked. It wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what they had taken from me, and what I had gained in return. I had built my life from the ground up, and no matter what happened, nothing could take that from me. When you spend enough time trying to rebuild your life after it's been shattered, you realize that the pieces don't always fit the way you want them to. Some gaps are too big, some cracks too deep to fully seal. But in that brokenness, you start to see things differently. I never expected that the family I had fought so hard to escape would still be present in my life in some way. Even after years of silence, their ghost lingered in the corners of my mind. There were moments when I thought I'd moved on completely, when I felt strong enough to say I didn't need them. And then there were nights, like any other, when I felt that ache in my chest, reminders of a childhood I couldn't forget, no matter how far I ran. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It wasn't even the loneliness that followed, or the humiliation that I was forced to carry for so long. It was something deeper, something that I had only begun to understand over time. I'd spent so much of my life trying to prove myself to them, trying to earn their love and acceptance. But what I hadn't realized was that I had never stopped seeking that validation from the wrong place. When I built my life, when I fought through every day to survive, I was learning a hard truth. No one can fill the void that others leave inside you, not even family. And more importantly, I had to let go of the idea that their approval, or lack thereof, defined me. What I had to learn was that I had the power to choose who I let into my life. I was no longer bound by the idea that family was something you had to endure, no matter how much pain they caused you. The family I had known for so long was no longer the family I needed to carry with me. It was a hard realization, but it was also the most freeing one. Because when you stop letting people hurt you, when you stop allowing them to define who you are, that's when you begin to define yourself. It was never about them, not really. It was always about me, about how I saw myself, how I understood my worth. And that realization that I could live a full and meaningful life without their approval was everything. It meant I didn't have to let the scars of my past decide how my future would unfold. I could choose a different path. I had built something for myself. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the life my parents wanted for me, but it was real. I worked hard to earn every part of it, and with each step, I gained a little more of myself back. But it wasn't just about the achievements. It was about the peace I found. The peace in knowing that I no longer needed to prove my worth to anyone. Not to my father, who had always told me I wasn't good enough. Not to Alan, who had been the favorite. And certainly not to my mother, who had never had the strength to stand up for me. Marcus, who I loved more deeply than I had ever known was possible, became my world. They didn't need me to be anyone other than who I was, and in that unconditional love, I found the strength to be the person I had always needed to be, the person I had been running from for so long. One evening, after the phone call from my mom asking me to return, I sat down with Kendra. We were in our small but cozy home, the smell of chicken enchiladas filling the air. We'd had our usual evening routine, kids in bed, dinner finished, and just the two of us in the silence. She knew. She always knew when something was on my mind, even when I tried to push it down. So I told her about the call, and about how, for the first time in years, I felt this overwhelming sense of nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a deep clarity. I don't think I need to go back, Kendra, I said quietly. Not for them. Not anymore. She sat across from me, the soft glow of the kitchen light casting a calm warmth over the room. You've built something for yourself, Salvador. You've built a life with people who love you. That's what matters now. And in that moment, I knew. It wasn't about what my family wanted or what they expected of me. It wasn't about making up for their mistakes or trying to get back what I had lost. It was about the life I had created, the one that was mine, built on my own terms. That was the moment I truly understood what family meant. Not blood, not the ties of shared history, or the weight of old expectations. Family was the people who stood by you, who loved you for who you were, without judgment. Family was the love you chose to give, the bonds you forged through trust and care, not the ones forced upon you by fate or circumstance. The realization came like a wave, at first overwhelming, then grounding, and finally freeing. I was finally free from the chains of my past. I had built my own family, and for the first time in my life, I felt at home. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for yourself is to let go of the past, stop seeking approval from those who will never see your worth, and choose to build the life you deserve. The best revenge isn't in proving them wrong. It's in living the life they never thought you could have. And as I stood there, watching my children laugh and play, I knew that this was what true family meant. It's strange how life works out. You think you know what you want, but sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that lead you to the deepest truths. For so long, I believed that family was everything, that the love and acceptance of the people who raised me would somehow make me whole. But what I came to realize is that the family I had known was never meant to be my foundation. It was the life I built on my own terms that truly defined me. The day I was abandoned on that lonely Colorado rest stop, I thought my world had crumbled. But in truth, it had just begun to reshape itself. I didn't go back. I didn't let their cruelty define who I was. I found strength in the struggle, in the days when I had nothing but hope to cling to. And slowly, I built something real. A life where I no longer had to beg for approval. A life where I could be myself. The past never really disappears. You can try to outrun it, ignore it, or bury it deep. But it always has a way of resurfacing. My family came looking for me years later, asking for forgiveness, asking for help. But by then, I had already found something more valuable than their approval. I had found my own peace. I had created a new family, a new beginning, and with that, I realized that my worth was never tied to their love, or their lack of it. I had rebuilt my life, brick by brick, not out of resentment, but out of the simple truth that I deserved better. I built my life not because they wanted me to, but because I wanted to live for myself, not for anyone else's expectations. And as I watched my children, Ellie and Marcus, laughing in the backyard, running free in the same way I had longed to, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known before. The love I had found, the life I had built, was real. It was mine. So now, as I sit here, looking at the family I've created, I know one thing for certain. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's living the life they thought you couldn't have. But I'll leave you with this. What does family mean to you? Is it the ties that bind you by blood, or the people you choose to share your life with? And when you look back on your own journey, what kind of family do you want to create for yourself? Because in the end, it's not about where you come from. It's about where you choose to go.